It's just, again, bringing a little bit more life and hyping up that excitement of the track. Wow, yeah, really impressed with that. What's up everyone, Luke here from Solid State Logic, and I'm here to introduce to you the SSL X-DynEQ. Building on the legacy of XEQ2, X-DynEQ features 20 different EQ types and filter shapes with dynamic EQ options for each shelf and bell filter, offering up to 24 dynamic EQ bands for detailed sound sculpting and intuitive control for adding complex sidechain dynamics via both internal and external sources. With the addition of tweakable and auto attack release and threshold, 3 new filter types and per-band stereo processing and sidechaining options, X-DynEQ significantly streamlines your dynamic EQ workflow with unparalleled precision and flexibility, allowing this powerhouse processor to shape your entire mix. X-DynEQ introduces 3 new filter types, notch, bandpass and tilt EQ, each designed for targeted frequency shaping from precise fixes to broad tonal balancing. Per-band stereo processing options offer detailed control over the stereo field on a per-band basis, and focus mode allows you to easily focus on shaping specific components in the stereo field, as well as the addition of the piano roll view that simplifies the visualization and navigation of EQ adjustments in a musical context. We've also designed X-DynEQ to be an evolution of XEQ2, and to help you get started with X-Dyn, we've made sure that X-DynEQ is backwards compatible with the presets from XEQ2 and can be loaded in directly through the preset manager interface, ensuring a transitional workflow for current XE2 users to X-DynEQ, more of which we'll cover later on in the video. So let's have a look at the plugin in detail, and then I'll show you just some of the many ways you can utilize X-DynEQ to shape and control your sounds, and also explore how we can use the powerful sidechain controls to balance dense mixes and bring movement and excitement to static sounding tracks. Of course, before we can begin using X-DynEQ in our sessions, we'll need to download the plugin, which we can do via the SSL Download Manager, available from the Solid State Logic website. Once downloaded, follow the instructions on screen to install X-DynEQ, and whilst you're there, you can also update all of your other SSL and Harrison plugins that are available. So now we've installed X-DynEQ, we can jump into our DAW, and here I've got a session where I've liberally used X-DynEQ in place of my usual go-to XEQ2. Let's go ahead and open up the GUI. From left to right, we have our input meters and input gain, along with phase invert controls. Our top graph that can display a range of signals including input, output and external sidechain, as well as a combination of multiple signals to help us accurately visualize the audio we're working with. Across the top, we have the processing type control with options for series or parallel, allowing us to change the EQ to allow band interactions to work in a similar way to how classic parallel hardware EQs operate. We can then edit the view modes, where we can change the dB range for plus or minus 20 dB to plus or minus 6 dB if we were wanting to focus on a smaller range for applications such as mastering. We can then also toggle to the phase and step display, as well as the FFT response. To the right, we have the focus view, where we can focus on particular components of the stereo signal, moving from our stereo band, then through our left, right, mid and side. As you'll see when I move through these views, the display focuses only on the filters set to the stereo component, and any new filters made will be created to affect the area we're focused on. On the far right, we then have the output meters with clip warning lights, as well as the output level control at the bottom. We also have the scale control, which allows us to apply a multiplier to all of the filter gains, or even invert them up to plus or minus 200%. This is particularly useful for magnifying the processing, or making complementary EQ curves between channels. We can do this by saving a preset, then opening it up in another channel's instance of X-DynEQ, and then inverting the curve to achieve better separation between conflicting channels with similar frequency responses, such as kick and bass. And finally, across the bottom of the GUI, you'll see the standard undo and redo buttons to move back and forth between plugin changes, then the preset selector, allowing you to access a host of SSL and producer presets to help you get started with a variety of different instruments or use case applications. We then come to the dot control tab that allows us to pin the node controls to the bottom of the screen, and then the piano roll, giving us quick visual reference to a musical note that each node is closest matched to. great for helping keep our EQ moves in a harmonic reference to our program material when working on a musical project. We then have our HQ mode toggle, giving us access to allow for oversampling for the highest resolution EQ curve. Even with HQ switched out, we employ our anti-cramping DSP processing for accurate EQ response while maintaining low CPUs. Following on from this, the zoom control allows us to resize the GUI, and the question mark accesses the contextual help tool, giving us a quick reference text for each area of control in the plugin. So, to get started with X-DynEQ, you'll see if I double-click the screen, I will create a new node point. Then my floating control panel will appear for the node, giving me the basic controls of a static EQ band with filter type, frequency, gain, and Q controls, along with a bandpass, dynamic activation, solo, and our band number. I can also quickly remove a node by simply selecting it and clicking delete. We can select the curve response by clicking band type, where we can then select the different bands, with access to high and low passes, high and low shelves, bells, filters, notches, and tilts. We can then choose from a selection of different curves for each band type, with options for a variety of curves, including options such as classic symmetrical, similar to those found on our classic analog mixing consoles, and classic asymmetrical, more closely associated with vintage EQs, where the boosted signal features a wide Q, whereas the attenuated signal features a narrower proportional Q response. Also included are a variety of notch filter types and high and low pass filter curves with custom Q, critical, Butterworth, Gaussian, and Chebyshev filters for tight control at either end of your frequency range. Variations of these curves are available, so definitely explore how each curve affects your source material to achieve the sound you need. We've also included options for bandpass filters and notch filters for critical EQ tasks, and a tilt curve for quickly rebalancing the frequency response of your source material. So there we have all of our EQ controls covered, but clearly this is only half the story, as we now have the ability to turn the shelf and bell curves into dynamic bands, enabling a vast amount of extra dynamic and creative control over our signal. If we head up here and click on the Dynamics button, we can activate this node to now have the option to become a compressor or expander. If we then click on the right arrow here, we can expand the controls to allow us access to the dynamics and sidechain options, with the threshold ratio, knee and range controls in the first column, then attack, hold and release, as well as the options to toggle between compression and expansion here. To the right of this, we then come to the sidechain control options, where we can add advanced functionality to these dynamic bands by triggering them via external sidechain, or interestingly, any of the other internal bands, giving us the ability to route complex cross-modulation inside of X-DynEQ to have multiple triggered bands from varying sources. This also extends to creating dead band triggering, where I can create a node to select an area of signal and then have this trigger another band's sidechain without having to engage that band. And this is where utilising the notch and bandpass curves become really powerful for isolating frequencies to trigger the sidechain from very selective frequency selections. Finally in this section, we then have the option to switch the focus of the bands from stereo, left, right, mid or side, and we can delete the node using the trash can icon, or by simply hitting the delete keyboard key to quickly remove the node. So with all these controls broadly covered, let's now grab a band and turn on the dynamics. When first instigated, the attack, threshold and release all default to auto, where we've taken great efforts to allow X-DynEQ to set these up as a great starting point. But you can further tweak these by clicking on the A, and now you can set these to your own preferences. Now let's hit the dock button at the bottom to move the controls out of the way, giving me some more space. And if I begin moving the node, I can set my frequency point and gain for the band. Then by clicking on these two arrows here, I can set the target range for the dynamics, which will inherently be tied to the attack, release and threshold controls. By moving this band control above and below the 0 dB line, I can allow the dynamics to move between upwards and downwards compression or expansion, giving us 4 alternative dynamic control styles to utilise as best fit. For a simple explanation of what this means, a downward active compressor reduces gain above the threshold and an upwards compression setting raises gain below the threshold. When we move to the expansion mode, a classic upwards expander boosts the level of an audio signal above the threshold, making loud sounds even louder, extending the dynamic range of the audio signal. Whereas a downwards expander reduces the level of an audio signal below the threshold, reducing the volume of the sound below this point. So now to dial in our node, we can easily cycle through our different bands and change the dynamic settings to quickly focus on specific frequency areas and instigate the compression or expansion to manipulate our signal quickly. Or we can set up our sidechain from an external or internal source and have these trigger our band to affect the signal in infinitely creative ways. The best way for us to see this in action, I think, is for us to jump over to some real-world examples. So here in our session, let's look at a few ways I've got X-DynEQ set up to resolve some common issues faced when mixing, as well as some more innovative workflows that X-DynEQ allows us to perform to create space and movement within our mix. Okay, so now we're in our session. First I want to play you the track with all my X-DynEQ plugins working, just so you can hear what the finished sound of this record is going to be before I talk to you about how we've got there using the plugin. So this track is by Valdis Stekelis called Stranger Amongst Friends. It's a really cool, sort of vibey, laid-back track. Have a listen to see how everything fits together, and then we'll talk about how we've achieved that. So from the top.
I close my eyes and I think of home. I tell myself that I'm not alone, 'cause I'm a stranger among friends. It's the beginning, it's not the end. I began to feel the heat. I went to checkpoint Charlie, where a pretend woman nearly got me. Then I would feast just for me. I was full but empty. Feeling came over me.
Cool, so as you can hear, it's a really balanced arrangement, but there's a lot of overlap in terms of frequencies. So in order to make this all work and be cohesive in sort of the keys, the guitars, the vocals working together, I've used X-DynEQ to carve space. And I think the best place to look at this is probably between the kick and the bass line. So what I've got here is X-DynEQ in two different channels. The top is my kick drum channel, and I've got my summed bass parts down on the bottom here. Now, the first thing you'll notice is on the kick. Now, let me solo the kick for you and let's have a listen. It's quite sort of low frequency. There's no real mid-range. There's not a lot of sort of upper harmonics. I've cut a little bit of 500s just to taste, just to remove some of the boxiness. But what I've done here for the kick is simply on my shelf at the bottom is boosted everything by about 3 and a bit dB, and I'm compressing everything above the threshold. So I'm raising the bass frequencies but containing them by utilizing the dynamics here. So I've got it compressor, I've set my threshold, and I'm just sort of taking 2 or 3 dBs off of that just to sort of keep the kick drum really balanced, just articulating in that low end. Now, what I've got on the bass line, if I solo the bass and we get rid of the kick, is the inverse. So the chorus there is very mid-range. You can see we've got sort of these harmonics around here, second harmonic through to sort of the 3rd, 4th, 5th in the low mids, and there's a little bit of bass going on, but it's not a subby bass. Whereas here, like we say, in the verses, it is very much in the same section as the kick drum. So what I've got here is the kick being pushed up with the lows, and I'm sending out to a bus and utilizing the external sidechain routing into my bass. So if I click here, I've got this sidechain section routed to external on band 1. It's in stereo, just because we're working on a stereo bus, but they're both mono information. And what I've got this doing is acting upon the sidechain of the kick. So those bits are soloed. Now you can see as my kick comes through, I'm making space in the bass area. if I take these out, you'll hear the groove change. Bring those back in. It's more space for the punch of the kick to come through, and we're augmenting the bass line in a way that we're giving it space. But I've done a little bit more to really make that sort of groove lock in. As we can see here, I've got my sidechain routed to duck on the sort of the fundamental of the bass line against the kick. But on the second band here, I've got the same external sidechain set up, but instead of being a compressor, I've got it set to an expander. And what that's doing, every time I've got the kick drum pushing down the fundamental of the bass line, I'm augmenting it and expanding upon the second and third harmonic, allowing that groove to be maintained and pushing the sort of the mid-range elements of that bass line up, so they're balancing themselves whilst locking in that groove pattern. It's just feeling like they're naturally filling up the same frequency band space whilst giving each other room to move. Now I've taken that a little bit further on here by having a send from the bass channel being fed into the kick drum. So the kick drum on the external input is affecting my band 3 here to compress against the bass line. So as I'm pushing up, I'm expanding the second harmonics and third harmonics of the bass, I'm now pushing that against the kick drum, again making space. So I'm cross-modulating these two channels to allow each other to make space in different frequency ranges.
I close my eyes and I think I'll fall. I tell myself that I'm not alone, 'cause I'm a stranger among friends. It's the beginning, it's not the end.
I mean, it's massive difference, just those two dynamic sort of sections playing off against each other in the low end completely changes the rhythm structure of the track for the better, allowing that groove to really be sort of maintained whilst being highlighted, and allows the rest of the track to really groove against itself. Okay, so in this part of the tutorial, I'm going to talk about how I'm utilizing X-DynEQ on my vocal channels. So what I've got here is my vocal double and my effects all sending to a vocal bus, and this is X-DynEQ doing the processing on that bus. The vocals are nicely recorded, so I don't have to do much sort of augmentation. But what I am going to do is just try and firm up the low mids, the fundamentals of the vocal, and just using the dynamics in this band is just control a little bit of that, boosting up the band, boosting up sort of the fundamental frequency of the vocal, and then just taming that, utilizing this gain control and threshold down here. So let's have a listen to the vocal without DynEQ, and then I'll talk to you about the processing I've done.
I lost my feet down Frederick Street. I was close to defeat. I began to feel the heat.
Now X-DynEQ in.
Checkpoint Charlie, where a pretend woman nearly got me. Then I would feast just for me. I was full but empty. Feeling came over me, though this is where I've got to be.
So as you can see, I've compressed the low mids and just boosted them, so we've got a little bit of dynamics control just to sort of firm that up. And at the top here, I've created a pseudo de-esser. So my band here is being sort of triggered by sort of the upper mids and the high frequencies where the S's, the sibilance is really coming through. And that is just going to duck. We've got it set to compression, fast attack, just to really sort of duck those out quick. But then I'm utilizing the next band here to expand against this band. So band 3 is setting the expander, because we've got it here looped through band 3 onto band 4. So every time I'm ducking the S's, I'm boosting the top end just to allow a little bit of air back into the vocal. I don't want to make it sound dark. Now we're going to sort of just play with those levels and the threshold just to sort of really fine tune that. But listen to the difference that makes, just these small changes. Look, let's take the focus down to 6. I'm doing sort of 2 dB gain in the low end, and I'm just sort of ducking a little bit, sort of like half a dB with a maximum of 3 dB on the de-esser, and then just a little bit again, boosting maximum about, what we got there, sort of 2 dB again, just to sort of allow those balances to sort of really augment, but not making any massive tonal shifts. So turn X-DynEQ off again.
I lost my feet down Frederick Street. I was close to defeat. I began to feel the heat. I went to checkpoint Charlie, where a pretend woman nearly got me. Then I would feast just for me. I was full but empty. Feeling came over me. Though this is where I've got to be. This is not the place.
Just firming up the low end, making that sort of vocal feel really solid in the mix, and just giving a little bit of air back in. I think we can fine tune that a little bit more on the top band, just sort of really dial in to make sure those S's aren't being overexcited by the expander, but we can sort of play with that as we go. So again, really quick way of utilizing sort of X-DynEQ just to sort of internally route some of these expander and compressor bands, just to sort of make a little bit of a dynamic shift. We don't want to flatten the vocal. I want to retain the life of the vocal. I really want to retain the performance. And this is a really nice, neat way of doing so. Right, I've got a bus coming from my vocal channel. I'm going to utilize that sidechain from the vocal to affect my guitars, my keys, my bass, to allow space across the entire mix. So let's have a look at the guitars first. In this section, I've got my guitars here. Let's just put that onto our stereo channel. I've got a stereo sort of EQ. I'm just cutting, again, the unwanted bits of the guitars. And then I've got a band here. So this band is set up to the mids. And this is sidechained off of the vocals. Now, if I turn this off first, let's just hear what the vocals sound like with the guitars before I've done any processing.
I lost my feet down Frederick Street. I was close to defeat. I began to feel the heat. I went to checkpoint Charlie, where a pretend woman nearly got me. Then I would feast just for me. I was full but empty. Feeling came over me. Though this is where I've got to be. This is not the place I want.
Now, what you'll see happening here is this band, band 5, is being triggered externally by the vocal channel, only in the mids. And again, I've got this band here being triggered by band 4. Band 4 being triggered externally again. So these two bands are making space in the guitar channel for the vocals. Now, again, we're only doing 3 and a bit dB reduction maximum. But that is making space for the vocal just in the mids. We're not affecting the sides, so the guitars aren't changing volume massively. Let's turn this off. You can hear the difference. Small movements, just ducking out of the fundamental of the vocal and some of the sort of the top end articulation, whilst not messing up the representation of the guitars in our mix. So I've done that with the guitars. I've also done the same if we move over to my keys, but in a different frequency section. So I'm not affecting the keys in the low mids, I'm just affecting them in the upper mids here. So where are we? 2K, and we're just ducking this time. In the sort of stereo. Let's have a look where that is. So the stereo field isn't being affected, we're just affecting the mids here again, just to make some space. And I'm doing this across my keys, my bass line as well, and my guitars, and I'm just making space in the mid of that mix, just to sort of let those vocals sing through. Now we can affect that just on the sides, but we'd sort of end up sort of changing the presentation of the keys there. But that's a really nice way to not only control our vocal channel, but then utilize that to control other elements and utilize that bus. So let me play this back, but I'm going to turn off all of these different dynamics on my buses.
I close my eyes and I think I'll fall. I tell myself that I'm not alone, 'cause I'm a stranger among friends. It's the beginning, it's not the end.
Instantly, we're not changing the feel of the track, but there's just so much more space for the vocals to really sing through, and there's so much more space for the stereo elements of the guitars to sort of sing left and right, because we're just, again, removing that mid-range sort of balance between the two. It's really giving us a stark contrast left to right. It's widening the stereo mix in a really articulate way, because it, again, is moving off of the musical information that's in the track. So we're getting the vocals pushing through. The groove of that is then augmenting the guitars, the keys, and a bit of the bass as well, to really just sort of cohesively sing together. And again, I'm doing like 2 or 3 dB moves. I'm not doing massive changes with X-DynEQ, but it's just so powerful. And it's so transparent with the EQ that I'm doing that I'm not feeling like there's any sort of artifact changes or anything sort of untoward going on with the phase cohesion. It's just feeling really cohesive as one track. It's great, I love it. This is exactly what I need just to get mixes sounding really good really quickly with minimal processing. Okay, in this section of the tutorial, I'm going to talk about utilizing X-DynEQ on my master bus. Now, whether that's in a mastering application or more like in this session where I'm utilizing X-DynEQ on my master just for some final mix glue, some final polish before being processed for the master elsewhere. Now, I've got Bus Comp 2 doing some glue compression. I've got low ratio, so 3:1 with a slow attack, medium fast release, and the sidechain just letting the bass come through, just to glue the track together.
'Cause I'm a stranger among friends. It's the beginning, it's not the end.
So just controlling those sort of elements of the drums and just bringing everything into sort of one sort of really nice polished mix. However, I want to use X-DynEQ to now just give a little bit more movement back into the track. I'm not doing massive amounts of gain reduction with Bus Comp 2, but I want to augment this to feel a little bit more fluid. So what I've got in X-DynEQ, if we turn that on, is just a little bit of augmentation. Nothing crazy. I'm not boosting much. A little bit of boost in the mid-range, 1.2 dB, just around where the fundamental of the vocals are going to be, just to sort of give a little bit more sort of presence there. But every other band here I've got set to 0, but with my dynamic section set up. So I'm going to expand the low end. I'm going to expand a bit around where the kick and the bass are meeting, where we looked at earlier, where the crossover point between the kick and the bass were augmenting each other. I'm just going to boost that up a little bit, just to sort of give that groove a little bit more push. I'm then just going to, up here, around 3K-ish, just duck a little bit just to sort of take off a little bit of the sharpness of the mix. And then I'm going to expand the top end just to augment, again, basically against sort of the ducking of the upper mids, at the bottom of the high frequencies. Again, move that against the upper high frequencies, and that's just going to be triggered externally in the sides. So, and that's actually being externally triggered by the vocals again. So as the vocals come in, that is going to sort of bring down the sharpness at about 3K. I'm going to utilize that vocal to boost the side elements of the mix, just to sort of bring a bit more air without cluttering up the vocal and not boosting the vocals, which is primarily what I want to avoid. So let's have a listen to how this sounds.
I close my eyes and I think I'll fall.
Zoom in again.
I tell myself that I'm not
very little movements, just brings back the vibe, brings back sort of the energy of the track after the compression. So we've compressed the track to sort of glue it all together, and now I'm expanding upon that glue to then bring the dynamics up a little bit. So this is where I'm going to utilize my scale control. So the scale control here allows me to emphasize or de-emphasize my EQ moves by 200%. Now, if I want to make these changes broadband across the entire track, I can now utilize the scale control to add a level of more to what I'm doing. So let's play with this scale as we listen back through and see what that does.
I close my eyes and I think I'll fall. I tell myself that I'm not alone. 'Cause I'm a stranger among friends.
It's just, again, bringing a little bit more life and hyping up that excitement of the track.
It's the beginning, it's not the
Again, a really quick way just to sort of find that balance. So I've made those balances that I like between the different bands, but instead of having to manually go and change all of those individually, this scale control is a really nice way of just sort of finding that balance. I think about 140% of that. That's 150, let's try that.
I close my eyes and I think I'll fall. I tell myself that I'm not alone.
There we go with X-DynEQ.
'Cause I'm a stranger among friends. It's the beginning, it's not the end.
That's not even subtle. That is not even subtle. The way that bass is now just coming up with the expander. Again, it's 3 dB, but it's making such an impact with the way that track is moving. We've pushed up the mid-range so that the vocal's sitting really nice and prominent in the vocal, but it's not burying everything else because we've got the articulation that we spoke about earlier, allowing that vocal to make room in the mid-range against the guitars and keys. Now they're filling out the sides, and we're boosting this up broadband in the center, that's stereo. It's all just working really nicely together just to give a real movement to the track, and that feels really exciting and energized while still having excellent dynamic range, but in a really nice, cohesive way. I've said that too many times, but it's really what this EQ is doing for me, is allowing a level of mix control that I couldn't achieve without these bands working so nicely and coherently together. I'm just going to let you listen to this again. I'm going to turn it off and on, just really listen to the changes that is making.
I close my eyes and I think I'll fall. I tell myself that I'm not alone.
Turn it off.
'Cause I'm a stranger among friends.
Back on.
It's the beginning, it's not the end.
I mean, I can't say any more than that. Just the life that brings back into the track, the clarity of the vocals, augmenting the sort of the top end of the track, sort of bringing out that excitement, the mid-range pushing forward, and the bass just working together with the kick, just adding those dynamics, that groove back in. So easy to achieve, and with such little actual EQ movements anywhere. I've not done anything more than 2 or 3 dB anywhere in the track with this EQ, and it's just given so much more space and life into this track. So I'm not fundamentally changing the tones. There's no artifacts being introduced by massive gain boosts or reductions. There's no phase coherency issues going on. It's just a really super clean EQ with so much control. I'm so pleased that we're able to offer this because I'm going to use this everywhere. XEQ2 was my go-to. There's still a place for XEQ2, but I'm going to use X-DynEQ pretty much everywhere now because it just gives another facet of control, just adding those dynamic elements in. Wow, yeah, really, really, really impressed with that. If you want to try this out, you can download the demo. You'll have 30 days to sort of get this into your tracks and have a listen, and undoubtedly you're going to enjoy working with it. However, if you're an SSL subscriber or an all access subscriber, this is already waiting for you on your SSL Downloads Manager right now, so you can grab that, stick it in your tracks and get to work with it straight away. Thank you very much for joining me today. I've been Lucas with Solid State Logic. If you've enjoyed this, please check out some of our other tutorial videos, and I'll see you again next time. But for more information on this and any of our products, check out solidstatelogic.com, and I'll see you then. Cheers.